Hey, Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that High Trust is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach free.
That's solid, but what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now, with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the iTrust framework. Go to hightrustalliance.net to learn more.
Fun stuff. Fun
Three,
stuff.
two,
All right.
one.
Crisis management, yeah.
That's a
Three,
crisis, Sean.
3, 2, 1, blast off. Is that what you're doing?
No, three, two,
Lift off.
one. Sean, here's the thing.
1, 2, 3.
This is our, I believe, is our last podcast for
This
InfoSecurity
will be the
Europe
last
2025.
podcast with a guest, unless we're randomly surprised by somebody later tonight. But
Yeah,
I don't know
think
that
it's
that'll
getting
happen.
late. I think it's
I
getting
think
late.
it's
but
clearing. It's clearing up out there.
Yeah,
It's,
right.
yeah.
We saved the best for last. How's that? No pressure, Steve.
No pressure, no pressure. So it's actually a good thing because it's a good way to do maybe a little recap about what has been going on. And you actually, I know you were on
Yep.
the panel.
Yep.
But before we get there, a little introduction about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Steve Wright. I've been in this industry for 30 years. I've worked.
Happy anniversary, 30 years.
Yeah, I
30
know.
years of
Well,
security.
I remember this as a young man, you know. So I feel like I've grown up with this a little bit.
Nice.
Obviously, it used to be at InfoSec in Olympia,
Yep.
which was, some fond memories going back. My career, it can be broken up into 3 seasons. A season of risk, a season of cyber, and I'm now in the season of privacy. So I'm working with a whole variety of different clients and industries over the last 30 years. But the ones where I've really probably cut my teeth were Siemens, John Lewis, Unilever, Bank of England. So I've kind of tried to get across different sectors so that I can really understand the problem and then be the most all-rounded individual to try and solve or help solve those problems. So that's me.
Very good. I mean, where do we start? 3, 2, 1, blast off. So let's maybe we kind of wrap with kind of the bigger picture. Let's start with the panel you're on with the crisis management.
Yes.
Because I think a lot of the talk there's talk about resilience. I think that's been a big topic. Talk about being able to respond, but I still think those are very well. Certainly, the second one is very technically driven. If you're certainly at a show like this,
Yeah.
Give me your definition of crisis management. in the context of what you help organizations deal with. Yeah.
Staying calm during a storm. That's my definition.
Okay.
Because the challenge that we have is partly sort of cultural. In different organizations have different appetites to risk. And the sort of, I know it sounds a bit cliche, but the tone from the top really does set how, if you like, resilient and ready you are for a potential incident or breach.
All right, so let me get on that because stay calm. It's a good thing when you know you're kind of how to handle it.
Yeah.
So you don't just stay calm and like, it's gonna pass, right? Stay calm because you have prepared to it.
That's the key.
All right. So
Preparation.
How do you do that?
Well, you have to practice, basically, like anything, like any sport, any discipline. You only get good at it by just repeating it. And I think what we don't do very well is practicing this. And that's why the panel, was well attended, had a full auditorium and nobody left, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, sure it is.
And 40 minutes went very, very quickly, which is another good sign. One of the questions that came up was around ransomware and whether you pay for some sort of ransomware, and like any good lawyer, it depends. But I would say there is a level of attitude towards payment, and I think it depends what industry you're in and what the potential extent of the impact of it. So what I mean by that is, when I was at John Lewis, we had a ransomware attack. We actually paid a bit in Bitcoin for some sample data, because without the sample data, we couldn't actually validate the credibility of this demand.
Right.
So
did they have it? Can we recover?
Yeah, can we recover? Exactly right. And if we'd not done that, and we did that in conjunction with the police, so we didn't, just think about it and go, oh yeah, let's pay. And that cost us by nothing compared to what we would have paid had we gone fully. So we asked for, a sample data, if you like a test data, and gave that to our data analytics team, and they come back and said, no, this isn't right, this can't be right. So we didn't pay it. And we said, okay, do your worst. And nothing happened.
And nothing happened.
Yeah. Unfortunately, M&S, Co-op, didn't have the same experience. That wasn't that John Lewis was more prepared, I don't think. I think we were just perhaps didn't have as sophisticated attack back then as perhaps the ones that they've suffered, which have been very debilitating.
So one of the things, obviously in retail, finance, one view of how to deal with it. If you can move into the healthcare space, very different story perhaps.
Yeah.
Critical infrastructure as well.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons I started off with it's not just the tech, and I'll say it's not always just the cyber, not just the information part of it.
Yes.
For crisis management, not just ransomware. So what do you see with respect to the big picture of crisis management? Because it can cross from digital to physical, and one company to many companies, and the crisis can really begin to explode when people are involved.
Yeah. So the other word, apart from preparation, then when the proverbial hits the fan, is containment. So trying to contain it. So if you take the example of Marks and Spencer's, they literally pulled wires out the back of servers and routers. So that quick decision is really critical.
Right.
Like, how do we limit the damage? Now, it took them then, the best part of 6 weeks to get those back up and reconfigured, which was why the shelves were empty.
Right.
But they communicated very effectively, very quickly with their customers, and in an empathetic way, or certainly appealed to, us as consumers by saying, look, this is completely outside our control, obviously, but we take this very seriously. We're sorry for the inconvenience. So a very empathetic response. So then people were rallying around to get M&S back up and running.
Right.
Now they changed the narrative. I think that's very clever.
Yeah.
Now they couldn't have done that just on the fly. They must have practiced. So
You think they prepared
yeah,
for that?
yeah, definitely. It's got all the hallmarks. Whereas Co-op tried to bury it, and that doesn't pay, because then you have this mistrust, this misperception that you're trying to pull the wool over my eyes. What's happened to my data? So, but it is a balancing act. You can't just simply tell everything because you don't know everything.
Right.
But some level of communication in an empathetic way. So trying to be transparent in a kind of, but with a little bit of empathy.
Well, I'm glad you went there, because Sean is more like the technical cybersecurity guy. My background is branding, and so I always think about what you just said. Like, nowadays is not 30 years ago. Everything is in the open.
Yeah.
A company really needs to act the way say it is, right? Before you could say, well, I'm going to advertise I'm a good company, then in the back I can do whatever I want. I feel like that backstage now got cameras, and
That's
people
a good
can kind of
analogy.
see.
Yeah.
So when we look at the way you manage a crisis as well, now, of course we talk about cybersecurity, but it can be another kind of crisis, right?
yeah.
I think being transparent and honest is it's a good answer. But looking back in your 30 years experience, do you see this as it's changed the way I kind of highlighted and is it better now for society in general?
Well, there's two parts to that, or my answer are in two parts. So first of all, yes, it's definitely changed. I mean, you know, even 15 years ago, you know, there was zero tolerance for this, right? The public would not tolerate any kind of breach. It was horror on the looks of faces, politicians and business people. Now we're much more, there's much more apathy. You know, there's a kind of sense of, oh yeah, it happens to the best of the best.
It's gonna happen.
Yeah, it's inevitable.
Is it apathy or empathy?
Well, I think it's I think it is close, but there is a kind of like, you know, when I saw about the cyber attacks, I just kind of like, yeah, inevitable, right? They've got customer data, consumer data, they're bound to be attacked. Surprised it hasn't happened before. Whereas 10 years ago, I'd be horrified at the very thought.
Yeah.
You know, similar with the banks. But I do think, you know, your different industries, and I think the level of, I thought what you said was really good about the backstage. Nowadays, I would say there's much greater understanding about IT and technology and its dependency for the business to function.
Yep.
And I think that's what's changed. So, you know, the role of the CIO and the CTO is much more prevalent. You know, they you know, and the board now understand that without those people, nothing's going to happen, right? You've got your business processes without the data is pretty useless. So I think the attitudes and the culture has changed around that, and therefore and cyber has gone way up. I used to work at PwC, and it was a struggle to talk to people. You know, it never happened to me. And of course, succession after succession of breaches and incidents made everybody aware. And now it's top 1 or 2 risks, you know, after obviously economics and tariffs.
So Marco was talking about the kind of the exposure of the backstage, and I think generally companies have tried to either leverage legislation or even just have a mindset for doing the right thing. And I think consumers and even business partners want the brands they work with to do whatever the right thing is.
Yeah.
And there are laws to help them along the way with that.
Yeah.
But so I think the narrative, the conversation has been widened. So so to your point, IT is much more familiar.
Yep.
Cyber is much more familiar. Do you think that, I'm just thinking of things like ESG, right? We speak to the green, the green need.
Yes.
And we see some companies do the same for cyber, but we also see a lot of greenwashing. And I'm wondering, cyber washing, and do you think that we're in a position where presenting cyber and our posture of cyber readiness as a competitive advantage, if we don't practice, is going to bite us in the tail?
Yeah, I think that was a great example, because, you know, there is an element of greenwashing or cyber washing, if we could coin a new phrase here. I think I'll draw a parallel to GDPR, which obviously had massive impacts, and ripples have been felt in California, and you know, and pretty much over 140 countries have now got some type of privacy law, you know, shape or form. So the pushing of whether it is greenwashing or whether it is cyber washing. I think what's happened is, and this is partly with the kind of always on everywhere availability of data. I think nowadays people just expect that, and so if suddenly the service is down, I'm frustrated and much more intolerant than I was 10 years ago. I would have expected it. Patch Tuesday was a bit kind of like, let's go for it. Let's hope it still works.
At least we know it's Tuesday.
Yeah, exactly.
That and taco, right?
So I think what has happened has been a bit of harmonisation. That's what I'm trying to get at, I suppose, and I think that's a good thing, because then expectations for everybody everywhere should be roughly the same. And the second point I wanted to mention was about trust, and I think digital trust has really elevated up there. And I think now, if I think about the board, I report to the General Counsel of a financial services organisation in the city, and now I will have regular updates with the board about digital trust, right? Because it correlates directly to profit and loss. So they can see the relationship now between that, and I think that's what's changed. That it's become much more transparent. Whereas, as you said, ESG is a little bit more tricky. It's harder to correlate between the two. Cyber, easy. This equates to this. It costs us that, and it's like an insurance policy. Privacy, trust. That's about protecting consumers.
Let me ask you this: is it because it's measurable and or we have good communication around it in terms of what matters? Because I'm just wondering about like your conversations with the board. We hear all the time from the CISO perspective that they need to speak to the business, translate the tech and the risk in a way that the business can understand.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, because you mentioned the culture from the top down in crisis management. How does that meet in the middle? And it sounds like we're making progress in the communication and the measurement, or maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think we
compared
are.
to the ESG thing. I'm just trying to use that.
Yeah, no, it's a good example, because there are about 4 different benchmarks for ESG. You've got S&P, there's just these different measures, right? So if you're an organisation, which one do you put your... What happened with cybersecurity was ISO 27001, as you know, became the de facto, and I feel that a lot of organisations hide behind that as a certification schema. But then the same's happened with privacy in terms of GDPR, So I think that has just evened up, made it a level playing field, a bit more helpful. So I don't know. You see, the biggest issue for any company, apart from the culture, is third parties. It's still the biggest issue. It always was the big issue, right? Because you're relying on those. If I think about our organisation, talking to HR, and there's 22 applications, of which all different providers, and that's our personal data of all our staff, going across 22 different systems in 22 different countries, probably, or all in the cloud, but spread, all over the place. So now it's become, with globalization, which I know is a bit of a swear word in certain parts of the world, now it's become very difficult to sort of follow the data, and that's, so I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we'll ever get there, because things keep changing.
Right.
Do you remember a few years back, and they were talking about sort of segregating off the network, the internet?
Oh yeah, we've had conversations.
Yeah.
About that, yeah.
I think you can understand it.
Different internets.
Yeah, different internets, right? Or on this internet.
Right.
This is for the liberal, kind of minded individuals, freedom of speech, that sort of. I can almost see that.
Some of the Web3 stuff kind of still plays with that.
Yeah. I can almost see that coming back into play in the future. But who am I?
In the meantime, we have sovereign cloud.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, trying to nationalize the internet is going to be a big problem. as I think is a big problem to nationalize the economy in general. And so to go back into the crisis, it's always easy to maybe point fingers to somebody down the line in the supply chain, even if it's true. But I was thinking, when you're the company that is responsible for that, I think that the public expect you for you to have done your homework and vetted everybody. So you're still the one responsible, I believe.
Yeah, and so back to your point, I think you're onto something there, because what I have found across all the different organisations, sectors I've worked, is there is still a lack of understanding around data ownership and accountability, and that is prevalent everywhere I look. So I think whilst we've matured in certain areas, our attitudes to security, our attitudes towards privacy, I think we still haven't come to grips yet, as well as a population, with the concept of who owns my data, and why have all these people got access to my data, and and obviously you get a free Mars bar in exchange for your passport data or whatever, and people readily give it away. Exactly. So we've all been victims to that, and maybe that will change.
Yeah, it's funny because people think it's changed a lot, and I think it's changed the size of it. It's kind of like when you talk about cyber attack and social engineering. Social engineering always existed. It's just that it's on a different scale.
Yes.
So when people are like, and now they know everything I do, but I get a discount when I get the card or the membership. I'm like, you do realize that the supermarket chain has been doing that for way before decades. The internet. Yeah. And they know exactly what you buy, and they're selling your data to someone else because
that's right.
What you buy is not enough of a margin, but people don't know that.
I was certain I was going to win that Porsche at the airport when I was 21.
Yeah. How did that
go? It was a raffle. It
all started there. You can pinpoint your
the first
data disclosure journey.
I want to end this with taking advantage of your experience and your forwarded thinking, and I just love to look into the future. And I'm not going to keep you accountable about that. But
I'm nobody.
The level of complexity we went from, things has always happen and you get more complex, and sometimes it's too much to wrap our head around it.
Yeah.
But then eventually we get there, we understand that it unhackable doesn't exist, so we get used to. Where are we going with, like AI, fake content? And I don't know, sometimes it's like, how are we going to handle that? I think we will, as a humanity.
We have to.
We have to, right?
The deepfakes will do our crisis management for us.
Yeah.
I think, how do we get to this?
But I mean, are we going to get to a complexity that we can still somehow manage on a moment of just we're going to live in a crisis, in a permanent crisis?
I don't know, because I suppose, the cybersecurity industry is a bit like a Cold War, isn't it?
Yeah.
And there comes a point where you go, well, hang on a minute, I'm not going to do it because it would cost too much, or it would do, or whatever the counter argument is. I think, to your point about the future, for me, I don't know if this is me wishful thinking or just what I speculate, but I think what will possibly happen is this data accountability angle that we touched on just a second. This data ownership issue will become more personalised, and I can see a future where we, as much as we would keep our passport quite close to us, or certainly we would treat that with a certain level of care, or something that's very, very private, I think we might go back to that. And therefore, I think the concept of kind of data brokers as an intermediary between us and, I don't know, insurance companies, advertising, marketing organisations will then be, well, what's the trade-off and how much am I going to? So I could see a future where, and could be 50 years away, where essentially everything's, your DNA, your biometric data, everything is controlled by you, and only you, through biometric ways, that I can't even think about, will then release what I want to release. So, you start off as a newborn baby, and you're given your digital identity, and that's very unique to you. And until you're compos mentis, where you can actually make decisions about it, it's locked up, right? And then you reach an age like 18 or 21, where you learn to drive, or where you go, oh, I'm allowed to pass with my data. So I can see us kind of almost in the future having to go back to that because of the lack of assurance through that entire data supply chain, because my data is probably out there, fit for, and as you've been hacked, my email address comes up multiple times, when I go in there and check that. So I can see us moving to that where we're sort of autonomous and we control our own data.
So if I look at it, utopia, I hope so. You turn on your digital access. We have an old conversation about giving your driver license to drink in a bar.
Yes.
Do you really need my address? No, you only need my, the date I was born. I'll just look at my face. But anyway.
You didn't even need the date.
Right.
You get yes or no.
Well, that's a biometric thing, isn't it? Because if you think about it, you put your hand on the bar, and they go, oh yeah.
Yeah, but what I'm saying, what I like about you is that
green light.
You turn it on and off. Like, all right, now I need to shoot this data. Then it's mine again.
Yeah.
Utopia, great. I can tell you that coming here a week ago from LA to Heathrow, right? Didn't use my passport once.
Really?
I was it was all my biometric.
Okay. Yeah.
So
Facial
right now,
recognition.
I didn't decide part of that. Some I did, some I didn't. So I don't remember switching something and lock it up again. It's out there.
It's almost like a digital citizen that has, and you're affiliated with countries, but that doesn't, mean that's who you are. And there might be certain changes because I don't know, I'm from Ecuador. And with that comes some default settings, if you like. But there's this digital version of me, and I control that rather than what's happening at the moment.
That will be a great...
Yeah, I think I can see that. And I think it will be, I can easily see us having chips. You get like your dog and cat, right? You just get chipped at birth. You're chipped at birth, and there's and it doesn't come of age till 18, and then you decide what you want to open up, if you like. And so let's hope that does happen, because then, well, mind you, this whole industry might be out of pocket. So just hope we've all retired by then.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Well, I'm glad we had this kind of reflection on utopia or dystopia in the future. I like that.
Who knows? Maybe your utopia is somebody else's dystopia.
Could be. It may as well be. But I think I'm going to write an article about this.
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for the opportunity, especially as it's late on day 3 for you.
We're winding down.
No, we're closing the floor.
Yeah.
They're going to give us the
exactly.
keys, and
That's right.
You're
looking up tonight.
We're going to sweep. we're going to sweep up, drink what's left of the beer bottle.
I was going to say that's we call that a lock-in. I don't know what you call it in the States, but that could be a good night.
One for the ditch.
What was that song? You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here. Steve, thank you so much.
Well,
pleasure.
Yeah, pleasure to meet you both.
Likewise.
And safe travels back home.
Thank you.
You as well.
And for everybody, let's just finish this. This was our last
on location. We'll be out and about. We have one more to do.
Okay, but that's a surprise.
We're
going to be on Westminster, so stay.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was.
Don't say that either. Sorry. Now we have to go somewhere.
ITSPmagazine.com/InfoSec25.
There you go.
All our content for InfoSecurity Europe is going to be there, so stay tuned and subscribe. Thank you.
Say hi to Steve when you have a chance.
Yeah, this guy.
Thank you.
Hey Sean, do you know what? I think that our listener want real protection against cyber risk, and I know that HITRUST is the leader in cybersecurity assurance. But what makes them the go-to choice?
Well, according to our friends at HITRUST, because their framework covers 100% of the known tactics, techniques, and procedures, in 2024, organizations with a HITRUST certification had just a 0.59% incident rate, meaning 99.41 stayed breach-free.
That's solid, but what about staying sharp over time?
HITRUST regular certification process isn't just a checkbox, it actually drives improvement. Repeat customers see up to 54% fewer corrective actions needed year over year. And now with their new AI security assessment and certification, you can actually tackle AI risk with confidence as well.
Then check out the HITRUST framework. Go to hitrustalliance.net to learn more.